This episode of the Media Leader podcast was edited by our production partner, Trisonic. And if you're looking for podcast production support, we highly recommend them. Find them at trisonic.co.uk.
I think it takes a bit of time coming out of the darkness, a period of time where we all went through, that people just get those creative juices flowing again. And I certainly think, advertisers are looking up now at out of home as going, this is the best way to get that brand impact. But at the same time, using a data overlay to optimize and hit those hard to reach audiences that they maybe can't achieve on other channels.
Welcome to the Media Leader podcast. I'm Jack Benjamin. Earlier this month, JCDecaux reported strong fiscal year 2024 earnings. The global business saw 9.7% organic growth, a strong result in and of itself. But JCDecaux's UK business grew 18.4%. That's a growth figure typically more associated with tech platforms like Meta or Google. Dallas Wiles and Chris Collins are co-CEOs of JCDecaux's UK business. I wanted to sit down with them to pick their brains about what is driving the strong growth in the UK and how the broader out-of-home industry can grow its share of ad revenue after years of plateaued market share. We also talked about why JCDecaux is making 2025 its largest ever year for screen deployment, whether the retail opportunity for out-of-home is overhyped, and whether brands are taking advantage of the creative opportunities digital out-of-home has to offer. This is that conversation. I hope you enjoy. Dallas Wiles and Chris Collins, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having us, Jack.
Yeah, great to be here.
The two of you have been co-CEOs of JCDecaux's UK business now for nearly 6 years to the day. I'm curious for each of you. I'll start with Dallas first. How did you get your start in media? And then also, how has sharing leadership responsibilities been going for the two of you for the past 6 years?
Okay. How did I get a start in media? Well, I was fresh off the boat in 1999 from South Africa. And I did what most people who are generalized, shall I say, what most people do when they go traveling, they spend their money really quickly and have to get some work. And I didn't want to work in a pub, do bar work, and I didn't want to spend a lot of time with my Antipodean friends or South African friends because I came to enjoy the culture of Europe. So I looked for a job, and there was a temporary job at JCDecaux on data capturing. And in essence, my first job at JCDecaux was filling in agencies and clients' names into the first booking system at JCDecaux in 1999. Winded forward 26 years later, I'm still there.
Wow.
So obviously they maybe struggled to get rid of me, or I found a bit of a niche there. So that's how I fell into media, particularly in the UK.
And what about you, Chris?
From my perspective, so I was in corporate finance and sort of working long hours in different areas, but sort of fancied doing something different. And a role came up with a media company that at the time I didn't really know. It was called Maiden Outdoor. I knew nothing about it. And interviewed, looked up the company. It was doing really well. Thought, yeah, let's give it a go. So I sort of worked in various, like Dallas, various positions in the business, joining as a sort of commercial analyst. They had no idea on pricing forecasts, budgeting, different sort of methodologies to run it. So I really went in to do that. And subsequent to that, sort of ran various divisions within the business. I think one of the great things for Dallas and I is we've worked in many different areas within the business. So when a sort of problem or an opportunity comes across our desk, one of us has a sort of feeling of how that area works. Absolutely. And what we can actually do to do that. So then worked through that business, was bought by another media business that was eventually bought by JCDecaux in 2010. And so I joined JCDecaux in 2010, looked after our rail division and then our retail division, so sort of the full P&L responsibility for those. And then Dallas and I were kindly asked by Jean-Francois to take over the UK business running, which was quite a interesting experience because we knew 6 months before we actually took on the role. So there was a lot of
behind closed doors.
Exactly. And sort of interesting from a point of sort of seeing how things were happening and sort of talking to each other about maybe we should have a look at that, but not being able to action anything until we sort of came in role, as you say, almost 6 years ago.
Yeah, sort of a lame duck period.
Yeah, it was difficult.
But it was good. It was good because it really gave us a chance to look at the business maybe with a different sort of spectrum.
What stood out to you at that time, and especially relative to where we are now with the company?
I think what we did was in the first 6 months of our tenure, which was April 1st, 2019, was pretty much just get an understanding of what we believed what good should look like. And it's the first time you really have full access to everything, where you can firstly ask the awkward questions of people who've been there in similar roles in the past, but also it's always the why. Why have we done it this way? And why are we still doing it this way? And I suppose 2019 rolled on, and we actually had a fairly successful 2019, and the two of us were looking at each other going, this is not bad, isn't it? We've got this nailed. We know exactly where we're going to. Record year in 2019.
Really optimistic at 2019.
Exactly. and then I'm not going to talk about what happened after that.
Yeah.
But I think what happened after that actually made us do a lot more changes quicker in our roles, because the whole world had to change. And we had to change as a business and as people. And one of the things we focused, I think I'm proud to say we focused on, was a people-first culture within our business. And I think that a lot of people say that nowadays, but truly, we made sure that we put a people-first culture, and I think that's played, a huge, significant part in our performance that we're going to talk about later on in the podcast. But a people-first culture is everyone has to buy into the journey you're on together, and we've got 15-20% of our business who's been working for JCDecaux for 20 plus years. So trying to change that people-first culture, new ways of thinking, when people are maybe entrenched, ingrained in the way they do things, is a bit of a challenge.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we were fortunate to take on what is a fantastic business, and from a product and asset portfolio, fantastic. But how do we actually look to drive more value from the business? And that was definitely where we saw the slightly weaker point of the business was the culture. It was very corporate, presenteeism in place, and just trying to go, okay, so how do we affect it in a way that people can actually perform their best in a business? And so a lot of sort of work was done with Carly and our people team as well about looking at different ways that, rather than sort of that culture of presenteeism, have a culture of actual performance, which has been a big change.
And how have you two worked together? Because not that many companies necessarily run with co-CEOs, and I imagine there's always the argument to say, well, maybe that's too many cooks in the kitchen. But JCDecaux had co-CEOs before you came on, and obviously you guys have been working, sounds like, pretty well for 6 years now. So how is the relationship between
I think you'll be actually surprised that there are more people in joint leadership roles. I just think just because they're not called co-CEOs, everyone doesn't think other people are doing that. There's agencies in the UK who've got founders. The two founders are still running the business. They're still focusing on individual facets of their business. If you look at, TV, commercial sales, sponsorship and programming, you've still got two leads leading that. So although the titles might not say co-CEO, I think there's a lot more if you look into it. I think for us is decision-making is far quicker.
That's interesting.
And the reason you've got that is you've got someone to talk to or talk at about what is the decision we need to make. What are you worried about? What are the concerns and what are the opportunities? And I think, coming out of a really, a lull in the UK marketplace for out of home due to everything that happened in 2020 and those next 2 to 3 years, it gave Chris and I the ability to make some of those decisions far quicker than maybe if you're sitting at top on your own. Because sometimes I think if you're sitting on your own and make a decision, you might sit on it a little bit longer and think about, is this the right thing for me or is this the right thing for the business? What's the feedback we're going to get? So I think, the way we've split it up is, focusing on our core strengths, but also, I think I mentioned to you when we were walking up in the lift, earlier on, is if I'm away on holiday, I know there's someone else who knows exactly what's going on in the business, and there's someone who's a support function, which gives me the ability to switch off and get the that time that I need. And obviously, commercial sales is busy, but commercial partnership and the relationships that Kristen has is incredibly busy too. So I think there's a perfect balance, and there's a blended balance. I suppose the one thing we always have to get is who owns what, but what are the decisions we're going to make together?
Yeah, I mean, I'd echo that. I think if you look at some of the sort of slightly darker times that we had not long after we took over, it was great to have someone there to bounce ideas off. And, the decision making, everyone sort of doubts decisions that they're going to make. But to have someone sitting alongside of you who can actually sort of give you an honest feedback, it makes you either go forward with the decision or look at it, in a bit more detail. So it does make it quicker in that way. I think our business is quite unique in the fact that, we are a media business, but we also have a big property business. And, it's all that chicken and egg side of neither can work without the other.
Yeah.
So there's core functions that we both sit across. But then there's the ability to, from my background of sort of always really dealing with our partners, our strategic long-term partners, and what that asset base brings to our portfolio, and Dallas's sort of background of dealing more on the brand side of things and the media side of things, we can have those focuses, but still maintain both of us the sort of relationship with the core functions of the business. So, my background is a bit more financial, but Dallas will be speaking with our CFO all the time. So we can both get involved with IT, with the people function, but also know where those two key sides of our business and sort of highlighting the focus on that.
It gives you the ability to pivot quicker. That's my opinion. You can make a pivot and a decision collectively, and you can go full steam ahead. Where sometimes I think, people will have a meeting to discuss it with, people who own these opportunities within the business, and then you have a collective decision. We pivot far quicker, we make decisions far quicker, and also one of the things, bringing it back to the culture was once we've pivoted or made that decision, people get given the accountability to make change within the business rather than waiting for us to tell them what to do. They've got the tools, the skill sets, the teams, the capabilities. They can make that change because we believe that is the change that is beneficial to us to pivot in the right direction. End of the day, we need to make money for our owners, don't we? We're running a business, but we also need to make sure that we're giving the best product, the best opportunity to our brands and advertisers when we do pivot or do things differently versus the market.
It's a really interesting vote of confidence in favor of sort of collaboration. And normally the argument against sort of collaborating is it takes a lot of time, whether or not it's between multiple different businesses or within businesses themselves. And so it's interesting to hear a really positive experience of how to create collaboration within your business. You've mentioned that there was a dark period a couple times now. I'll ask about the pandemic in a bit, but at the moment, your business is in pretty rude health. And in terms of your financial results, which were just released earlier this month, they were both positive worldwide and in the UK. Correct me if I'm wrong, we got 18.4% organic growth to 433 million euros, which is equivalent to around 364 million pounds just in the UK. And I'm curious what you see as the main drivers for the business in the UK market relative to not just out of home, but to JCDecaux's other business in other markets.
Well, I think, out of home has had a record year in the UK. It's growing to 1.4 billion. So it's in a really strong place. I think globally we grew 10%, I think, and the UK 18% for JCDecaux UK against a marketplace that was around 8%.
Yeah, just under.
Just under 8%. So there's been a really strong performance on that. And I think what's been key to us with driving it is, for example, the investment that we're putting into the out-of-home marketplace. So we really see ourselves as the sort of a huge potential to drive impressions and reach in what is quite a fragmented media landscape at the moment. And we really feel that we can actually drive the ability for our brands and for our clients to be able to offer amazing cover and reach in key cities in the UK where, TV is struggling to do that now. So I think there's a huge opportunity that we're definitely capitalizing on. And we sort of see out of home as the public screen within that. So when we would have previously talked about, how many assets we're going to deliver, it's far more about the audience that we're delivering, the audience. And I think our new plan that we've got coming in this year is going to generate about 500 million extra impressions a week.
Wow.
In key areas.
So you're adding 1,000 screens, I know, in just London alone. So that's doubling the footprint, just about.
Yeah.
2/3 of those are going to be TfL bus shelters.
Give or take, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm curious. So first of all, why the strategy around London? I mean, it sounds like perhaps the obvious biggest city, sure. But why not other areas as well? And how is that driving? You said driving great growth in terms of the impressions, the amount of audience that you can reach and target. What else is sort of factoring into the decision making of this is going to be the year where we're going to really invest?
I mean, just to some of the points that Chris made there, television reach is declining. You look in London, television reach is declining significantly. London is, as you said early on, the best city in the world. In our conversation we had.
Yeah.
And the fundamental, most important thing is we could put 1,000 screens in anywhere, but if it's not going to give brands extra audience and extra reach, why would you do that? And our concern is some of our competitors are just putting in screens for the sakes of screens and hoping the money will come. We're putting in screens in new communities, new cities. I think you said you've been, at Wanted for nearly 3 years now. London's changed. There's new communities around there. You can go to Elephant Castle, Battersea, Nine Elms, Stratford, Wembley. I can go on and on. These new communities are bubbling up, and guess what? There's more audience there available. So, that's the investment strategy there. We're not just stopping in London. We've continued to invest across the key regions. Again, I suppose if you look at TV decline, it's struggling in the regions like Manchester and Edinburgh. Right. So the reach medium's we're here to stay. We've been here forever. I suppose we're the oldest channel, if you can talk about it, really. Mm-hmm. But I think advertisers are seeing that reach is incredibly key, but also reach in real-world environments. That real-world experience I think is coming back. I think everyone's forgotten about being locked behind closed doors. So I think that's the focus for us. We must make sure that we don't just focus on London only, and our build and our product strategy hasn't been that for the last 5 to 6 years. We've invested in some incredible portfolio, digital capabilities across loads of key cities. There's more to come in the next 12 months of these key cities. We've got a great rollout in Nottingham coming in on a recent renewal and win of Nottingham. So
We're so proud of our rollout in Manchester that we did recently, which I think is one of the best portfolios you'll ever see in a city in terms of audience, etc. We're expanding our Edinburgh network. We've got huge investment coming in the rail infrastructure. So, London is probably the headline of the moment because of the scale of investment with together our partner Transport for London, who, have really been with us the whole way on what we see as the vision for London advertising. And it is about growing out of home, not just our estate, but actually bringing more money into the sector, which is huge for us. And that could be, from London to Manchester to Nottingham to Edinburgh to rail stations to airports. Heathrow, we've got some exciting plans. Obviously, they've got the third runway approval now, so that's going to be a big focus. We launching a new strategy on that very soon as well. So there's a lot of stuff going on throughout the UK, but I appreciate London has definitely got the headlines.
You've talked in the past about trying to get the out-of-home market share of total ad spend closer to 10%, whereas it's been sort of hovering in the mid-single digits for a little while, though it grew this year, as you mentioned. How do you get there? You mentioned, okay, maybe TV is the other big reach play that has been having more of a challenging time. Is it trying to take share of budget sort of from TV, or is it going after expanding the pie in other ways?
I mean, interestingly, and I'll let Chris comment on the products, out of home is only a 4% channel in the UK. And if you think of it, out of home, pretty much digital out of home was one of the fastest growing, if not the fastest growing sector last year. I think search or online would have maybe been similar. So we're at 4%. Pre the nasty time on the dark period, we're closer to 6%. So digital impressions, digital dollars, the amount of money being spent in digital, 80% of all ad dollars are spent, on digital platforms. So yes, reach is important. We mustn't forget what out of home is built on: brand, fame, and creativity, which is maybe why we mentioned the reference to the reach medium of TV. But we've invested in tech. For out of home to grow, we fundamentally, we're backed by our owners to invest in tech in order to make sure that we are part of that omni-channel buy, or the perceived omni-channel buy of the future, because maybe it's not going as quick as we'd like it. But we built our own SSP View, which is now connected to 46 DSPs globally. They've got all JCDecaux's impressions on there for about 24 to 25 markets around the world. Continue to roll out as digital capabilities and out of home improve at JCDecaux. We also invested in a DMP called Displace. Again, we got 60 to 70 salespeople and commercial people in the UK who are in that DMP every day, creating bespoke solutions for our clients, which is all based on audience profiling, audience data, the route methodology, but the JIC that we all apply, we all pay for and fund in the UK. So, we have to make ourselves relevant in that tech world. And I think we've done a great job for JCDecaux. I think the industry is getting there. I think if you look at our recent release, global release, just under 10% of our digital revenue globally was from programmatic.
That seems quite low relative to the amount of revenue that digital out of home overall is accounting for. I think that is around 39% of total revenue for the fiscal year. So why is there this sort of disconnect between programmatic buying of digital out of home screens? I would expect that figure to be a bit higher than it is.
Well, I mean, if you look at some markets, if you look at close to the Netherlands is close to 40%. You look at Germany, I think the German marketplace is more advanced again, 28 to 30%. It's an education piece. You've got to tell that story over and over. And also, we don't just want us to be looked at as programmatic, because you've got an SSP or you've got a tech platform that people have to spend money programmatic. Why is it a benefit to our clients? And obviously, I think we're in a good place because we can do the branding effects still, but now we can activate at bespoke hours or interesting hours where maybe the audiences are traveling and going to. And I think some of the clients we've seen is they're using some of their search and digital and online display budgets now in out of home. I would say I'd love it if some of the agencies would move a bit faster in the omni-channel buy. I still think maybe out of home's not at the main table for omni-channel purchasing and digital decisioning, and we will continue to drive that narrative.
It's a job that the whole of the out of home sector needs to do. Definitely an educational piece. The programmatic piece around digital out of home is fairly new to the market, and we just need to keep sort of evangelizing about the potential for advertisers. We talk a lot within JCDecaux about the public screen and the private screen, and we know that the public screen of out of home can actually make your private screen, so your mobile phone advert, 52% more noticeable. So actually, the branding part that out of home can do for that. So there's a real complementary focus there that, we need to keep evangelizing. We talked about it when we started this amazing partnership with Transport for London. We talk about it. I was with Westfield last week. We're talking the same sort of thing about how can we push that whole piece about the drivers that out of home can have within this. And I think that's a huge opportunity for us. We're very lucky to work with some amazing partners, be that, Transport for London, Network Rail, Heathrow, Westfield, Tesco, etc. And this is really where we're getting round the table with them and talking about how can we drive this whole out of home sector. So, a lot of great conversations about that. But I do agree with Dallas that whilst we know at JCDecaux the priming effect that out of home can have for brands, we need to be even more sort of vocal as an industry about how that actually can be of real value to clients across the piece.
I think it's simplicity. I'm one for that, particularly in our business, is we've got to make it as easy as possible for people to spend their money with us. If you add complexity, uncertainty, difficulty, too many touch points, I think you've got to make it as simple as possible. And I'm sure we'll talk about measurement later, but you've got to make sure that people are knowing what they can get. Look, we can't hide. We're a public screen. We're in the public domain. You can walk out your door and you can see our screens. And some of our competitor channels, have slightly different problems to what we have. But, in the public realm, there's nowhere to hide. And I think, that real world, people, I always think about it. You think people always take a photo of themselves with their face on a screen, be it a billboard or a bus shelter. And that must be relevant because people like that brand fame. And it was actually something I had a conversation last week with an agency lead, and they were saying, it's funny how whenever you see any award entry in media, there's always a visual of out of home.
We get a lot of media plans that feature out of home because it's the nicest looking of part of the plan.
So we must be doing something right. So I suppose, my call out today is those agencies and clients who maybe, haven't tried out of home as much as they would like to, give it a go. How do we work on this journey together? Because look, we have to grow the sector. The sector gives back. There was a report last year by KPMG, 46p in every pound in the UK out of home goes back into infrastructure, communities, funding. I don't think there's many other channels that do a similar thing. As I said, we're a 4% channel. So I think, people spending money in out of home should be proud that they're actually giving back to communities themselves. So it should make brands feel good about themselves too. And I think that's some of these programmatic platforms will help that for the future.
Is there a long tail play? Because when you say we want to make it easy for us to be bought, that's a lot of the same messaging that I hear from TV, frankly, and some of these other more reach channels that are a bit harder to buy, but are wanting to attract more of these digital first brands that grew up on search and social and are now looking at other channels or formats for where they can advertise because they've probably hit a bit of a plateau with those platforms. Is JCDecaux's strategy to start going after some of those brands?
I don't think the long tail will come overnight. We're not going to be able to be transacted in 3 clicks or whatever it might be on some of our competitors. However, there are big brands that none of us are aware of. And when I talk about big brands, they might be brands between 250 and 500 in the brand spending money in media, who sometimes didn't want to have a 2-week display in out of home. They didn't want the classic 2-week display. They only wanted hours between 4 and 7. And now we've got the audience to show that those people are there. So the long tail brands, look, I'd love more people. The more buyers we've got is better. The more impressions we sell are even better. But it's not a play for the long tail. It's a play to show that, the best of both worlds, the 60-40, the Burnett's and Fields, everyone's spoken about it. It pretty much was the buzzword at some of the, research and some of the, presentations in 2023. Everyone's going back to that. Ritson's being, very vocal about that. I think the thing is some of those smaller brands, and I'm talking about smaller brands, not in the long tail brands, now realize that there's an opportunity in out of home to reach those audiences that maybe they've thought in the past was too difficult or too expensive. So I look, we're not a performance channel, but we can using our data and our data sets tell people where their audiences are. And if someone is, seeing our screen and then making a purchasing decision on a mobile phone, the best of both worlds, that priming effect of out of home is definitely playing its part.
I did want to ask about measurement, especially because you did bring it up. Usually whenever I talk to agency planners or advertisers, the bugbear for them is measuring outcomes for their business, and I think that's part of the reason why moving into more programmatic or more online inventory has been so attractive, because they can see pretty immediately, well, I spent this money and it got me this. So what innovations are occurring, I guess, at JCDecaux, but also in the out-of-home space with Root and other anyone else that you might be working with to make it easier to measure out-of-home?
I suppose I can answer that because this is fundamentally the backbone of our commercial strategy, in sales and marketing. It's something that we've always been challenging out-of-home, by econometricians, measurement, return on investment. And I suppose there's a bit of two things. We internally, JCDecaux ourselves, asked marketeers last year, 200 marketeers, what is the fundamental, priority for them or concern for them. And as you said, measurement came out, particularly for them, but also creative. I'll talk about measurement first is, in essence, so we decided, we need to do a bit of work, take a bit of ownership, for our sector, but also at JCDecaux. And we did some work with Nielsen and Talon, the out-of-home buyer, to actually prove that we're not measuring the right things. And when we actually supplied them with the granular data to Nielsen, and we did the same with Kantar, they were actually surprised at the granularity of data that we were sharing with them. They never actually looked at or had access to it. So we've now given them the access to it. And I mean, one of the campaigns for a big brand, I won't mention the brand's name in case I get told off, that we weren't meant to mention it, but, it got 42% ROI, and that's a big brand. And that's a brand in the top 100 in the UK. To get a 42% ROI on measurement, down to the granular detail. So what we've done is our data experts in-house are now opening those conversations with clients and agencies to talk about measurement, the effectiveness. So give them the right opportunity, give them the right data. Econometricians are now starting to say, actually, we can measure you far better. If I flip onto creativity, and I'm sure Chris can jump in if he needs it or give any point, I think less than 10% of all creatives in out-of-home are pre-tested.
Really?
Yeah.
Why is that?
Just hasn't been a tool, maybe timing, opportunity. So again, we've done work with System 1 and Lumen. I think System 1 does a lot of pre-testing for TV and other channels. So again, we've done a lot of case studies and a lot of testing. And often we would get pushback. I'd be in a presentation with a client, we'd get pushback that their out-of-home didn't work. And then you looked at the creative, which was a press ad just converted into an out-of-home ad. And all the basics of, pack shot, where should the location of the title be, where the branding location. So we've done a lot of pre-testing, a lot of work with them. And in order to help clients, what we believe would be create the perfect poster. Now, we're not trying to tell creatives how to do their job. We're just taking the data and the information that System 1 and Lumen have applied to, thousands and thousands of creative tests that we're doing. It must be working because at your recent Ad Wanted Media Research Awards, we won an award for that piece of work. And I think the other good thing is, and it comes down to your research awards recently, I can't remember the last time, if ever, out-of-home actually won the Grand Prix for research or effectiveness.
Oh, it's a good question. I don't know if that ever happened. Yeah, I need to check.
And little old out-of-home is actually now saying, we can be measured. We've got to. I often say this internally. We've got to be careful. We do not want analysis paralysis, because if you're analyzing everything, you lose focus on what you're meant to be doing. So I think some of those things we're doing. We've got loads of brands. I always say we need brave CMOs to challenge you. How do we pre-test together? But look, some of the tools we've got internally, we've created an AI tool called Optics, which helps you, pre-test your creative in a street scene. It gives you an idea. The client doesn't have to accept it or take it as this is the best way to get your brand. But some of these capabilities that we've got in out-of-home, particularly at JCDecaux, is giving clients the comfort that when they do put their ads in the real world, they're actually going to get a better return now because they are doing a bit, making sure they've got the perfect poster for the channel.
I think this definitely is one Dallas mentioned earlier, the sort of pivot and the ability to pivot as a business is a huge one for us, and we are focusing far more on that challenge around measurement than we've ever done in the past. And I think as an industry, we need to do more of that as well, because there's definitely still a lot of sort of talk going out there about, 3,000 billboards here and no data behind it. and actually as an industry, we need to be looking at that. We need to be saying to the market, our sector can provide this audience, not can just provide, an extra 100 billboards here. It's more about what they deliver for the client. And I think, the more we can collaborate on that and talk to the sector and talk to the brands, talk to our clients in that manner, I think it's really going to be a growth potential for out of home.
I mean, the best example is TfL and Wavemaker last year. They won an award for language changing at departure and arrival gates at Heathrow. Relevancy, giving a narrative, making everyone feel inclusive. That's just data. Now, I know there'll be other channels listening to us going, yeah, but we can do that too. And we're not saying that no one else can do it. What we're saying is there an opportunity now for audiences and brands to engage at the right time with people in their native language. In London, if they're coming from Spain or if they're coming from, Brazil or wherever. So, the data opportunity has come there. But again, simplicity. We don't want to overplay all the data, because once you get to granular detail, there's other channels who have got far more granularity than we will ever have. But I think it's just using that in a smart, efficient way.
Especially for, the fact that you have so many digital screens now, to me, that opens up a huge amount of creative potential. And that is why we see really interesting creative given to us whenever we're given a media plan that brands or agencies want to highlight. Because out of home is that visual medium, quite large screens in big public places. Do you think, though, to your point about creative earlier, that there's still not actually been enough done with the technology that you have in terms of making the best use out of digital screens, to your point changing the language? These are really interesting creative solutions for highly targeted areas. I imagine there is probably a bit too much of we've just repurposed an ad and trying to cut corners. Do you find that is still persistent?
I don't want to get wrapped over the knuckles for saying people repurpose ads, because we've all got our own businesses to run. We've got digital screens with motion capabilities, be it in rail stations, be it the underground, be it retail, as a sector, be it gyms, be it, wherever it may be. And we're still getting, static copy. Our rail environments can take 10-second copy. And there's plenty of 6-second copy going on other channels that, we believe can be used and displayed. So, I think it is.
You can actually repurpose creative from other channels.
Of course, and that's just not the static one. And that's the work we're doing with Lumen and System 1.
Right.
The pre-testing. If I think that, the stat might be wrong, or maybe one of the stats that I've made up myself, I don't know, but 90% of TV and others is pre-tested, which makes sense because of all the stuff they're doing before it goes out live. Can you imagine if out of home 90% was pre-tested? I think there'd be a lot of better creativity, return on investment, more brands noticing the capabilities of out of home. But if we only as a sector still at 10% for creative pre-testing, we as a sector have to make that decision to make it as a priority. We've made it a priority as JCDecaux, and hopefully the rest of the sector make a priority to show the creative capabilities. Don't get me wrong, people are still doing great creative executions. Across, be it rail stations, station takeovers. I think it takes a bit of time coming out of the darkness, a period of time where we all went through, that people just get those creative juices flowing again. And I certainly think, advertisers are looking up now at out of home as going, this is the best way to get that brand impact, but at the same time using a data overlay to optimize and hit those hard to reach audiences that they maybe can't achieve on other channels.
I just like that you're referring to the pandemic as the darkness.
But it was a darkness because I don't.
It was in our office anyway. So it's the light sort of.
Exactly. People. We've tried to stop talking a lot about it in the office. So, I remember us coming out saying this is the new normal. And then everyone was focusing on the new normal. For us, it's about 2024. JCDecaux in the UK, significant growth as you spoke about it. You could say we performed better than Meta. We out-Googled Google. So we've had a great year. So our measure of success as two leaders of JCDecaux in the UK and for out of home is that's what good looks like in 2024. That's our measure of success going forward. But there were things that happened before that were very telling times. But
you got past, I believe 2023 fiscal year was greater. You had stronger organic revenue growth than in 2019.
Yeah.
So you got past into that new normal faster than some of the other media channels. I think cinema still hasn't gotten fully back to audience levels and box office revenue. But out of home did relatively quickly. What does the new normal, quote unquote, look like? I mean, we're pretty well past it now, but things have changed in terms of work habits, working from home. Maybe does that feed into the different screen investment that you're trying to make?
Well, I think there are different patterns in audience. There's no doubt about it. But I mean, if we look at, the year 2024, out of home grew 8%. We grew 18%. So we must be doing some things right. At JCDecaux, we're providing 40% of all the digital out of home impressions from just 25% of the estate. So
make that make sense for me. Why do you have such an outsized amount of impressions?
I think it's quite simple. Sorry, Chris. I think it's quite simple. We've got an ethos at JCDecaux, and even our chairman, Jean-Francois Decaux, we're on the key contracts. We walk the streets of London, Manchester, Edinburgh, wherever you are, and we make sure where the screen goes in is the best for the audience, the best for visibility. And what I said earlier on is it's increasing the reach for our brands. So we've got less screens, but our screens deliver, 1.6 times more audience. And that is the fundamental reason why, the Chris's reference point to, 25% of the screens, 40% of the revenue, it makes a significant growth.
There's a huge choose to care about where we put screens, massive. And that's all not just from the partnership side, the development people who are out there, but actually driven by data, driven from our commercial team and the data around it. And I think in the past, and it still goes on, out of home is too much about, just put an asset anywhere. And that's not the way we operate. So, I think that continues to offer a huge opportunity for out of home. And, we do sort of talk about big impacts, big attention and big audiences for what we do. And I think that was highlighted last year with what we're doing and the work that we continue to do with our really valued partners, many of which we've been with for decades, and worked with for decades on that.
You mentioned Dallas retail media earlier, or retailers more generally. I think a couple analysts on the street see this as a pretty big opportunity for out of home. There are lots of retailers that are wanting more ads in their actual stores. Can you talk me through what the strategy looks like for JCDecaux specifically in terms of what kind of partnerships you're looking to make, how big of a growth opportunity do you think this is?
I'm on the fence on this, to be honest. I think sometimes, sectors, media can come up with buzzwords, and I think my perception, and might not be a JCDecaux's opinion, is, retail media could be a bit of a buzzword. What does retail media actually mean? Because when you look at retail media, there's a lot of things that are included in retail media that maybe we would just say is traditional media. We got screens at 500 stores at Tesco, the entrance of every single Tesco. The 500 best stores, again, based on the audience, working with, their profiling, their club card data, close collaboration with dunnhumby. We've had a relationship with dunnhumby for, close on 15 to 20 years. So they are also thinking about their proposition in store. So they using us as experts and we're using them as experts. For us, retail media at JCDecaux, we've got relationships with most of the big shopping malls, be it the Westfields, and we're working in collaboration with them to make sure out of internal store media works as hard for them too. So honestly, we don't have a prescribed 100% focus on internal screens in retailers at the moment. We have conversations about it week in, week out. We work in collaboration with Waitrose again, a slightly different audience, which we're going after. I'm not 100% sure about retail media at the moment. I think it's an incredible buzzword that maybe it's a bandwagon that everyone's jumping on because, everyone's trying to make that extra pound out of it. Our focus is on our footprint today. We've got the best contracts. We've got great relationships. We've got the best shopping malls. We've got the best retailers. We need to make our assets work harder for them. And I have no doubt that if they want to focus on a different media or retail proposition of the future, they would ask us as a as a friendly partner to come and help and give them some guidance and see if there's an opportunity to grow their slice of the pie too.
And I think just to add to that, there's also the question of what additional or incremental does it deliver? And that's the key for me. Just putting in another 500 screens here, there, and everywhere is not a strategy. We need to understand more through the data of what these opportunities are going to deliver over and above what's currently there. How are you going to get cut through? Because there are, be it in the digital world or in the stores, there's a lot of clutter around. Our premise with Tesco and Waitrose was about having that cut through. The last thing you see in a clear environment before you enter the store. Our partnerships with Landsec, with Westfield, are all about having those amazing digital opportunities, in clear environments before you enter the store. So I think there's still a lot of work, and we're doing a lot of work with our retail partners on that link between what's spent in store to what's actually being advertised, and making sure that measurement is really being worked on. And that's more of the focus for us than actually just going, let's put in another 1,000 screens and see what happens.
You don't want to dilute our proposition.
Well, even though you're doubling it in London, that's a separate strategy.
That's a very, very good point. But I mean, our whole expansion in London has been based around data,
right,
and based around how London's changed. As Dallas said, there's a lot of, we call them sort of villages in London that our current asset base doesn't reach. Because it's been developed over the last sort of 8 years or whatever, that all these new areas have sort of popped up, and we need to move as London evolves. We need to evolve as well.
So if I'm hearing this fairly, if you were to see from data over the course of a period of time that actually in-store does work, that your retail partners want to add more, then you would respond by saying, okay, there's a reason for us to put a screen there.
Yeah, I mean, I think we are, to be clear, we are working with our retail partners already on this. But at the moment, we're not seeing that big jump on what incremental audience does this offer over and above our fantastic portfolio we've already got. Are we just actually doubling up? Or are we creating something that's not as good, not as strong? So, it's not so much of we won't do anything. It's more a case of we're working to understand if it is truly, for our clients, a truly incremental offering, or is it just more screens?
Gotcha. I've got one final question about the broader out-of-home market. We obviously had the acquisition of Clear Channel's Europe North business that was by Bauer. That's clearly a consolidation within the broader out-of-home industry. I'm curious, do you expect to see further consolidation within out-of-home in the UK specifically? And if so, how JCDecaux might want to respond to that?
I think, first of all, I mean, isn't it great news? The fact that you're looking at other sectors, be it radio, press, publishing, seeing out of home as the area for growth. I mean, that should send a message to all investors that, we've had a, Global enter the market, Bauer enter the market. They're clearly realizing that their current businesses could be great, everything, but out of home is an area where they can see real growth potential. So that's fantastic. And I think from that perspective, we're really positive about that. We hope there can be further collaboration in terms of looking at how we will grow the out-of-home sector and the best ways to do that. Do I see more consolidation? Possibly, but maybe on a sort of smaller scale. I think if you look at our market share, ahead of the others, and then sort of two other big parties involved, we probably wouldn't be able to buy anyone because of monopolies and mergers commission. So I know I have to be quiet when I say that because they might be listening on what we're up to. But, that we just have to, look at it from that. So our space is about organic growth rather than acquisition in the UK. And I think, as you kindly mentioned, our results are showing that organic growth is pretty strong. So we'll continue.
Consolidation is happening everywhere. Look at the agencies. They're consolidating, and it'd be interesting if you asked them that same question.
Oh, I have asked them.
Yeah, and there's various viewpoints, and they consolidating. Some of the smaller players have consolidated already. So I think there will be bigger consolidation for big brands. So agencies who buy big brands, but there'll still be a lot of smaller brands who need to be agile and have the capabilities of buying smarter and quicker, which hopefully will play into some of the tech investment that we've done or as a sector. But I think there'll be consolidation going on for the foreseeable future, and it's happening everywhere. And I think it might even happen in other media channels too.
Well, we'll have to leave it there. Dallas, Chris, it's been an absolute pleasure. I really appreciate your time.
Thanks for having us, Jack.
Thank you. It's been great.
Thank you for listening to the Media Leader Podcast. Our executive producer is me, Jack Benjamin. Special thanks to our production partner, Trisonic. You can find all our episodes wherever you get your podcasts or on our website at themedialeader.co.uk. But do please remember to subscribe to be notified when we release our next episode. You can also subscribe to our newsletter at The Media Leader to receive daily coverage of all the biggest stories in media and advertising. From all of us at The Media Leader, I'm Jack Benjamin. See you next time.